Welcome to Revitalize and Replant with Mark Clifton, where we equip pastors to take their churches from declining to thriving by pointing them to a new future and a new hope. Join us weekly for encouragement and practical advice in your pastoring journey. Here we are at Podcast Central. Oh, no, Podcast Headquarters.
We are at Podcast Headquarters. Where is Podcast Headquarters?
Anywhere we want to be. Anywhere we are.
Yes.
It's Revitalize and Replant with Mark Clifton. That's Mark Clifton. There's Mark Hallock. I'm Dan Hurst. There's Kyle Behrman sitting over there just running the controls.
We should do this podcast from Peculiar, Missouri.
Sometimes we do.
It would be a peculiar podcast.
Peculiar.
Yeah.
How far is peculiar?
About 30 miles. They sent in several names back in the 1880s to be their town, and the state kept sending back, said there's already a town named that, or it's already a town named that. And so the Secretary of State said, you need to pick a name that's peculiar. And they said, okay.
Oh,
You're
no,
serious?
that's
It's totally true.
Is that true?
Wikipedia said it.
Oh, well, then it
It
has
must
to
be
true.
true.
No, that's how they picked it. Seriously, it is. So
All
it's
right.
That's crazy.
Peculiar, Missouri.
Okay,
All
peculiar.
right, let me get into our subject today. My very first full-time ministry was in music and youth. And church that I went to, the pastor would go every Sunday. He would go out to the parking lot and count the cars. And I thought that was the strangest thing. And I said, why do you do that? He said, well, he says, just kind of, I just want to do a count. Gives me an idea who's here and who isn't. One Sunday he asked me to go out and count the cars because he was too busy. So I lied. I just, I just told him. He was so excited about how many cars were, and I thought, well, then I'll, if that was so important to him, then I'll keep lying. And, why do people count numbers? Why are the numbers important? Let's talk about it. Is it important or is it not important? Let's settle the issue once and for all.
Everybody has an opinion. I mean, some people are very passionate that you've got to count. I won't tell you who it is, but a mega church pastor once told me how many they had at their 6 worship services each weekend. And I said, well, that's great. I said, and he knew exactly how many was at each worship service. And they happened right one after the other. And I said, he said, well, we have cameras all across the sanctuary. And then he said, we take pictures. And then on Monday, we have some of our staff who take those pictures and count. So I know exactly how many are here. And I thought,
wow.
Well, that's a waste of time. Well, this is, of course, I've never preached to more than 100 people hardly, so, what do I know? But I thought, that's obsessive. Why do we care? Why do we care one week to the next? And I remember when I first went to Warnell and we started growing a little bit, I had a guy go up in the balcony, because that's what balconies are for in old churches, is to count heads. Nobody sits up there.
No.
So I had a guy go to the balcony, and he would count. And then they would tell me when church was over, how many we had that week. And I think it's in my book even. One of my elders came to me and said, we've been talking, Mark, and we're not going to count anymore. I said, no, I need to know. And they said, no, you don't need to know, because we've noticed that when we have more this week than last week, you're noticeably happier and easier to work with. When we have fewer, you're noticeably grumpier. No, they did. I'm not kidding you. And you know what? They were right.
Wow.
And my whole emotion was tied to how many people were coming.
Well, okay, let's talk about that before we get into this, because here's the truth. I think most guys who are listening to this, I know I've battled this in ministry, is why is it that so many of us, it's very fleshly, but we kind of make synonymous the growth of our church with our success
absolutely,
as a pastor, right? And
absolutely.
A lot of guys listening are going, because we so celebrate big churches, everything, the big is successful, right?
No doubt.
And so what do we say? I mean, that's partly why we're doing this today.
I mean, nobody takes a picture of a church that seats 600 and there are 20 in it and post it on Facebook and say, wow, what a great day.
You do. I've seen you do it.
I do that to be off.
We're trying to change the narrative.
But most people, you take a picture of a packed out church and say, what a great day. And you've heard me say, every time I do a conference, Paul never asked Timothy, how many are you running? And the only time I see them counting in the entire New Testament was on the day of Pentecost in terms of the new church. And that was 3,000 souls. But they didn't spend the rest of the New Testament trying to get to 3,100 or 3,500. They weren't obsessed with the number.
Yeah.
How many did we reach this month? They never even talk about it again.
Yeah.
Paul never even talks about it. He never talked about how many people he baptized or how many people were maybe they talked about it and just didn't put it in the text. But if it's not in the text, it's maybe not that important. Can I say that?
Yeah.
But on the other hand, we live in a culture no doubt influenced by the church growth movement, which says you have to count, you have to know who's here. Right. So I come down too hard on the other side of not counting.
There's kind of two. I think isn't it fair to say there's two ditches we want to avoid?
Absolutely, and I'm in the wrong. I'm in the ditch that says don't count.
Right. So there's the don't count, doesn't matter at all.
Me.
One side.
I don't want to know.
The other ditch is every number. Every numbers matter way more than they actually do.
Every person, every number is a person. Every person matters. You got to know who's here. So there are those two streams, right? And basically, I bounce back and forth, in my whole ministry from one side to the other.
But before we get into why and why not, you guys, Hallock, at your church, you have a very extensive, developed system.
Yep.
And what's the motivation behind that?
Well, and that's a good point, because I would fall, and I think Clifton actually would agree with this. If you're approaching the numbers from the standpoint of these are individual souls that we are called to shepherd, that's why it matters that we know they're here or not. That's very different than how many are in the mass so that we can make ourselves feel good because we're this big.
But we're going to go through Rayner's list here. But Hallock, what you're concerned with is who is here, not how many are here.
Amen. That's right. That's right.
There are others who really aren't concerned about who is here, but just how many are here.
That's right. That's right.
How many did we get in here today? How many can we count as opposed to last week? Okay, so here are some healthy reasons.
Okay.
In fact, let me give the healthy ones, since
good.
I have to struggle with this.
Okay, and I'll go unhealthy.
And you do the unhealthy ones, all right?
Thanks.
So here's some healthy reasons, brothers and sisters, why you should count people. Rhythms build discipleship, and regular attendance creates patterns that foster spiritual growth.
That's true.
So when you count, you're basically saying it's important that you're here.
Yes.
When you don't count, there may be a what's the word I'm looking for? Message that says, doesn't really matter whether you're here or not. We don't even count if you're here or not. But if we count every week and we say, this is how many we have, there's a message that attendance is important. And Rayner says it is important because regular attendance, it fosters spiritual growth.
Worshiping with the body matters.
It does.
On a weekly basis.
Does. Secondly, he says regular attendance enables connections. When you show up, you have a chance to engage. Now, showing up in person is totally different than watching it online.
Ooh, yeah.
And that's a whole nother topic for a whole nother podcast. But when we're talking about counting, I know some of you guys count how many views you got on your Facebook. And I'm always, sometimes I go to some of your churches and, I love normally sized churches. That's all mainly I work with. And it's great to have 30, 40 people on Sunday morning hearing the gospel. But then some of you will tell me, we have 100 people that watch us on Facebook. Because that shows.
May I say that that's a bunch of hooey?
I know it is.
Because
explain that.
The fact of the matter is, people watching online are only counted as watching online. The algorithms that they use is, do they watch 2 minutes?
Yeah, right.
So if they watch 2 minutes, they're considered as viewers.
Yeah.
So they may be only watching 2.5 minutes, and you're counting them as watching, listening to your whole sermon.
You have no idea how many came and watched, and again, so but the reason to count is because, again, it shows importance in attendance, and attendance helps spiritual growth, and attendance helps you connect to people.
That's right.
You can't engage with people if you're not there with them in your membership. It also helps you in shepherding them.
Yes.
And I've heard you talk about that, Mark. I got to know who's here because I know when they're not here.
That's right.
And when they're not here, then that's a shepherding issue for me.
Yes.
If this is a consistent thing, and if I don't ever count or pay any attention to who's here and who's not here, I'm not being a good shepherd.
That's right.
A good shepherd,
Yep.
can't believe I'm saying this,
Yep.
counts his sheep.
Yeah.
All right?
And that's right.
A
That's
good
right.
shepherd
That's right.
counts his sheep.
Yeah. I know my sheep, and my sheep
That's
know
right.
me.
And if I got 99, and how does he know one of them's gone?
Yeah.
Because he's counted 100, and now there's only 99.
Yep.
So in that sense, counting matters.
That's right.
Because it helps us be better shepherds. Counting also tends to reveal direction. I have to agree with that. Attendance is a simple way to spot whether things are, in many ways, not every way, but many ways, improving or declining. It's easy to push back and say, oh, no, you can be growing and not be spiritually growing. Okay, that's true. But let's be honest. Most of the time, if the church attendance numerically is growing, most of the time, there's some good things happening. Much of the time, if the church is declining numerically, there's some systemic problems
That's
there.
right. Yep.
And it's just the
how
way
it
it is.
Yep.
Fourthly, he says, opportunities increase. The more we have people together, the more we have opportunities to share the gospel, the more we have. So for these reasons, it's important to count. It's important because it helps people realize worship gathering matters.
Yes.
And I remember years ago when I used to work at the old home mission board back in the 1950s, I remember they used to say, you count what matters. And so when we would put together a report form for missionaries, what did we want on that report form? We wanted things that mattered. We counted things that mattered. And so in a sense, when you're counting attendance, you're saying attendance matters for all the reasons that Rainer just spoke of and for many reasons we could talk. So there's a good reason to count.
Yep.
It's because attendance matters, discipleship matters, shepherding matters.
That's right.
So those are the reasons
That's
to count.
great. Okay. But there's a dark side.
Ooh, you
There's
tell
a
me
dark
about
side.
that.
There's
All
a
right.
dark side. I
Let's
guess
hear
I'm
the
going to
dark
go
side.
there.
All right, go for
There
it.
are unhealthy uses, right? That's how he puts it. Unhealthy aspects to counting. Let me just go through these. The first one is this: legalism can creep in.
How so?
In other words, guilt-driven attendance goals can drain energy and obscure grace. So, in other words, you can be in a church where, and we got to be careful, pastors, because you can start looking at people, and if you care too much about numbers, all of a sudden, if you're not showing up every week, well, you must not be real serious about the Lord, or you come 3 out of 4. I mean, you can't win this game, right? But it can actually begin to affect how you view people and the kind of culture that you create. You're not going to win people to regular, joyful worship attendance through guilt and legalism. Does that make sense? Now, again, there's a standard there. I mean, the expectation should be and the hope that we worship the Lord every week, But if you're not careful and numbers become preeminent, all of a sudden you can create a legalistic culture where there are those that are serious about the Lord because they're faithful in worship every week, and there's those who are sort of faithful because they're there 3 out of 4, and then there's the 2 out of 4, and then there's the 1 out of 4.
Right.
Do you see what I'm saying?
I do.
What would you say to that?
Well, I think when you talk about legalism creeps in, sometimes you can have let's be honest, you can have a guy who goes to church every Sunday, and he's very proud of the fact that he does not miss a service. I even come when I'm sick, man. I'm always here. I never miss anything. And yet he can really be hateful toward his wife. He can be somewhat dishonest in business, and he may not even be regenerate.
Yeah.
But he finds a sense of value and personal righteousness, and he attends church every week.
So from that, you flipped it. So
flipped it.
from the person, that's
Right.
so true.
Right.
Yeah, that's good.
I'm here every week. These people aren't here every week. I'm here every week.
Yeah.
And they find their righteousness in the works they do rather than in who Jesus is.
And that's a culture that you, Pastor, have created.
You've created
probably.
it by
You know what I
saying,
mean?
Exactly. So the legalism is if you really love Jesus,
Yes.
you'll be here
Yep.
every week. And here's the deal, guys. We don't guilt people into being here.
Yeah, that's right.
You don't say, man, where all you were last week. What you got to say is, if they're not coming on a regular basis, what is it about our worship service that makes them think it's no big deal if I miss
Well,
that?
that's true. Yeah.
How about the way we read Scripture, the way we do corporate worship, the way we sing, the way I preach,
Yep.
that makes them think like, well, come see, come saw. I
Yeah.
can go, I cannot
Yeah.
go. I mean, they wouldn't do that if their football team was on a winning streak and the playoffs were at stake. They wouldn't go, well, I'll make this game. No, every game matters,
Yeah,
right?
that's right. Yep.
Well, we need to create an environment where every worship service
That's
matters.
good.
But legalism can, when I was a kid, and I still, my daughter-in-law gave me these for Christmas a couple years ago. She went on eBay. She bought 16 years of Sunday school pins. There's a little pin that had the Sunday school board logo, and then underneath there were little bars. Year 1, year 2,
wow.
year 3, year 4, year 5.
Yeah.
And I got 16, I got 16. And sometimes I wear them at the North American Mission Board like my medals.
And so,
okay?
listen, as a kid, so literally, help me understand this. You would wear those to church.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and you could only get them if you had perfect attendance.
Yeah.
If you missed one Sunday, you didn't get that year. You had to start all over
So
again.
it's naturally creating a culture where these kids are better kids or more godly.
Well, unfortunately,
kids.
if you're talking 10 years, it's adults. So it was adults wearing. But yeah, you're kids.
Yeah.
You go one whole year. First, you get a pin for joining Sunday school. You get the pin. But then if you go a whole year without missing a Sunday, you get a bar.
gosh.
But you could do penance and buy your way back in.
I'll never forget. There used to be
my
to be a Sunday school board, Baptist Sunday school board bookstore down on Broadway in downtown Kansas City.
Oh, yeah.
And we lived way up north Missouri. My dad was a pastor, and one day he took me with him to Kansas City, and we went to the Baptist bookstore. And so I'm in this big Baptist bookstore, and I see this whole shelf of Sunday school pins. I didn't know you could just buy them. I asked my dad, I go, can you just buy me some of these? Wow. It's like indulgences, you know. I don't have to do anything. I just give the guy some money and I get these pins. But he wouldn't let me do it. But anyway, some of you don't want to talk about it. So anyway, yes, it creates legalism.
Here's the next one, is growth becomes a game. Now, again, we're talking about the dark side of counting numbers, making numbers matter more than they should. Growth becomes a game. It's tempting, and this is true, it's tempting to chase numbers instead of people.
You know, there's a point to this also. In a game, there's always a strategy. You know, you have your plays.
Oh, boy,
You know, and so, boy, do we get into that. And we're known for that in the Southern Baptist Convention.
Yeah.
You know, we have our plays on how to win the game.
Right.
And then the game becomes more important.
Yeah.
And we don't consider ourselves to win unless we play the play.
So here's how I grew up. I grew up where we had revivals twice a year, whether we needed one or not.
Yeah.
And each revival, we would have one night would be Pack a Pew night, where you were supposed to, you'd be assigned a pew and you're supposed to bring. And that's nothing wrong with inviting people to come to hear the gospel. Don't get me wrong. It's a great idea, right? Yeah. But it's like, okay, well, you would tell your friends at work or school, hey, I'm supposed to fill a pew at church on Thursday night. Will you come sit in my pew so I can win this contest, right?
Yep.
Like it's Amway or something. Yep. And then you have another night where each Sunday school department would have to, each class would pack a pew. And there would be banners that you would be given. I can look at Hallock and he's going, did they really do this? And you would give away banners and awards for Pack a Pew night and that kind of thing.
Wow.
And, it's a good thing to invite your friends.
Sure, yeah.
But to create it in such a way that it becomes a game, and I beat you, and I remember so well, I would get to, when I was a youth and I was supposed to pack a pew and I didn't do my work so I would hang out in the parking lot and I would ask people to sit in my pew that night.
Oh my gosh.
And I would pack a pew.
Dude.
So I won the letter of the law, not the heart of the law.
Of course, Clifton, you and I have pastored churches where we had packed the pew.
That's true.
Oh, man. Well, I'm just laughing because I'm actually having flashbacks to some of because here's what can happen is you can slip into pragmatism very quickly, right? And all of a sudden now, ungodly motives creep in. I remember as a youth pastor one time, we did this huge outreach event, and I said, listen, if we hit 250 kids, you guys can shave my head bald.
Oh, no.
And here's the chair. We built this big chair. And guess what?
Oh,
they hit 250 kids, and I'll never forget it. And there they are shaving my head. And I'm going, gee whiz, Hallock, what are you doing?
Well, you bring up the third point that he brings here.
The third one, charisma overshadows calling.
And explain that, because that's exactly what you were talking about.
That's exactly it. When growth relies solely on a dynamic leader, it often collapses when that leader leaves. We were just talking about this, Clifton.
We were. And, also, when churches come to me and they say, hey, our church is in decline, can you help us find a pastor? That's who they're looking for. They're looking for somebody to come in and grow the church for them. Yeah. Because they've seen it happen in other places.
That's right.
This guy went there, and man, it grew because he's a dynamic leader, and it grew. But what happens is when that dynamic leader leaves, all collapses.
That's right.
I can honestly say the churches I've left have gone better because I'm not a dynamic leader. And so
the image that comes to my mind is, remember those, I don't see them around much anymore, but in the summertime, those blue lights that would you turn the lights off and it would just draw mosquitoes.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
Sure.
The yap zap things. I don't see them around much.
Bug zappers.
But that's like an approach to ministry. And you might call the bright light approach. Just turn that thing on and you will bring them. You turn it off and they're gone. And so that's the problem. Jesus is to be the hero and center of our church. He's not a dynamic personality.
Talking about this at dinner.
Yeah.
We all know some brothers who went to relatively small churches and they grew those churches. And within 3 or 4 years, they went to another church that was somewhat larger.
A little bigger.
And they grew that one. And now they're in even a bigger one. And it's like, it's so obvious. Yeah. Now, you guys listening to me are going to be really mad at me because you think I'm talking about you. Maybe I am. Because it's really obvious that, you left for a bigger place and a bigger place. Yeah. And you can make a statement and say, well, I have bigger opportunities, more opportunities. But, it just seems like charisma works here, it works there. And then when the charisma's gone, when that person's gone, many times the church does worse than when that person was there.
Yeah. And that's true with any organization, isn't it? The last one is quantity replaces quality. So sitting in a pew doesn't guarantee spiritual maturity.
Yeah.
That's interesting because one of the very first things that he brought up in this article, and you alluded to this right at the very beginning, and that is that regular attendance creates a pattern that fosters spiritual growth. And when I heard that, I went, yeah, so the opposite, though, is true also. Spiritual growth fosters regular attendance.
That's true. That's right. That's exactly right. That's some of the fruit that should be produced from that.
So what we talk about healthy-wise, I think, is what I try to encourage churches to do, especially churches that are struggling, that numerically are in decline. Rather than to focus on numerical growth, focus on your church's ministry footprint. How many people have you impacted with the gospel that week in your community? How many people's lives are noticeably better this month because your church did something for them? How many people did your folks share a gospel conversation with this week? Those are metrics that are important. And if you do those, then many times the number metrics of how many come to church will follow.
That's
so,
good. That's
hey,
really
this is a great article. It's a long article. We'll put the whole thing in the show notes. And I hope you understand there's some good reasons to count every Sunday, and there's some dangerous reasons if you count every Sunday.
So that wraps up this particular podcast.
By the way, we're counting how many subscribers we have.
That's true.
And it's not near enough.
Yeah.
And so...
and we get our joy from the number of listeners.
We do. If you want to...
right now, we're pretty pathetically sad.
We are. And so please hit that subscribe button. And we need you to subscribe.
Actually, you can subscribe more than once if you want to.
Actually, I would like you to take your wife's phone or your spouse's phone and subscribe, and then your kids.
No, this has got to stop.
We just care about numbers here. That's all we care about.
That's it.
We don't even care if you listen or not. Just subscribe.
Stop.
Thanks for joining us today on Revitalize and Replant. This podcast is brought to you by the North American Mission Board, where we help dying or struggling churches regain health for the glory of God and the good of their communities. If you found this conversation helpful, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform. To learn more about becoming a replanting pastor or to explore resources about revitalization for your own church, visit churchreplanters.com.